Over the last couple of years, I've gotten a lot of requests to do a shop tour of the new space. So today, that's exactly what we're going to do. Welcome to the new Bob Rosieski Fine Woodworking Studio. This is the view that you typically see in my videos, and we'll come back to this space later. But for now, let me give you an overview of the entire space to help get you oriented. The space is essentially a 2.5-car garage and a basement in one. The overall dimensions of the space are about 28 feet wide by 24 feet deep, giving it a footprint of approximately 672 square feet. However, as shown in the rendering, part of the right garage bay is taken up by the L-shaped staircase leading up to the main cabin, and a storage closet underneath that staircase. This reduces the usable square footage to about 580 square feet. So a little more than half of the 8-foot walls are below grade on 3 sides of the foundation, so the ground comes to about here. The 4th wall is where the garage doors are, as we'll see in a minute. Now this gives me the benefits of both a garage and a basement workshop without a lot of the drawbacks that those spaces would typically have on their own. Being below grade, the space never really gets above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, even on the hottest days of summer, as long as I keep the insulated garage doors closed. Now it can get kind of chilly in the winter, but it never gets below freezing, even without heating the space. Unlike a basement, however, I don't have the typical access issues because I have 2 9-foot garage doors that pretty much allow me to get in and out any kind of machinery, furniture, workbenches, or lumber. So these are really great. The humidity issues typically associated with a below-grade basement are sufficiently managed by our water heater. This is an 80-gallon water heater that heats water using a heat pump. Essentially what that means is that it removes the heat from the surrounding air and uses that heat to heat the water inside the tank. It kind of works like an air conditioner. But the side benefit of that is it also dehumidifies the space at the same time. So this is the northwest quadrant of the shop. And this here is the door that I used to enter the shop at the beginning of the video from the cabin upstairs. Now, as I mentioned in the general overview of the space, the staircase leading up to the main cabin really takes up a lot of space in this particular quadrant, really reducing the overall length and width of the space. So other than this storage closet here that goes underneath the staircase, this quadrant really is a space just for me to keep my drill press. Until just a couple of years ago, for the 18 years prior, I had pretty much done all of my woodworking using only hand tools. However, during those 18 years, the one machine that I never got rid of was a drill press. They're just invaluable for drilling holes in metal, and I use them all the time for cleaning up old hand tools using soft wire wheels that I can mount in the chuck. Now, for about 20 years, I used a 10-inch Delta benchtop model, and that drill press served me just fine for those 20 years that I had it. But back in August of 2019, this drill press came up at a local estate sale, and it was at a price that I really just couldn't pass up. It was in pretty much perfect condition, except for a little bit of surface rust and a couple minor dents to the cover up here. But other than that, it was in fantastic shape. So I decided to upgrade to this 17-inch floor standing jet, and I sold my 10-inch benchtop Delta. So here in the center of the right garage bay is the first surprise of our tour. Now, if you've watched my videos for any length of time, you've probably figured out that I'm primarily a hand tool guy. As I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, for 18 years, I didn't even own any woodworking machinery or power tools other than the benchtop drill press. However, that wasn't always the case. Prior to beginning my hand tool obsession about 20 years ago, I did in fact own all of the typical woodworking machinery that you would have in a hobby shop. However, I sold them all when I had decided to learn all I could about traditional handwork. In January of 2018, my needs changed. My family and I were in the middle of building the new cabin, and we were just getting ready to start construction of the staircases. And then soon thereafter, we would need to be installing the kitchen and bathroom cabinetry. However, when my wife and I went to price out the cabinetry that we wanted, we realized that we could buy the machinery, the lumber, and the hardware that we needed to build the cabinets ourselves for about a third of the price of buying the commercial cabinets. Now, I really had no desire to build cabinets completely by hand, but building the cabinets ourselves was really going to save a lot for our budget, which was really already quite overstretched. So reluctantly, I went ahead and purchased this table saw in January of 2018 so that we could finish building out the cabinets for the new cabin. I really have mixed feelings about the saw. It's an okay saw for what it is, but the dust collection is absolutely pathetic, even with the custom upgrades that I made. Not only that, it really takes up a ton of space in this garage bay, especially with the added outfeed table. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I may unload it after I finish doing the kitchen cabinets, but it is quite handy to have around for working with sheet goods. Now, I don't work with sheet goods all that often, but for the times that I do, I think it would be nice to have it here. I have other saws that I can use for working with solid woods, and I don't cut any joinery on the table saw, so for the most part it would really only ever get used for sizing and cutting up sheet goods. So I'll just have to see once the kitchen cabinets and bathroom cabinets are all completely done whether I feel that this is worth keeping or not. Here along the northeast wall is where I keep all of my mechanics and pretty much home improvement tools. The metal tall chest here keeps all of the tools that I need to work on the cars, the mowers, the tractor, and to set up and maintain any of the machines that I have in the shop. The DeWalt boxes are my contractor boxes, essentially. They handle all of my home improvement tools. I like them because I can put carpentry tools in one box. I can put electrical tools in one box. They're really portable, easy to take with me wherever I need to do work, even if it's just upstairs in the cabin, so I don't have to keep running down here for them. So I really like these boxes for that kind of stuff. On this side, I also have a router table, surprise number 2. So this was another tool that came to the shop in 2018 as part of the kitchen cabinet project. Again, while I could build all the doors for all the cabinets by hand, I really did not have the time to build dozens of cabinet doors by hand, so that we may never be able to move into this cabin. So I did go ahead and purchase this router table. It is a Grizzly router table, and overall I've actually been pretty impressed with it. The stock phenolic insert that it came with was junk, so I did go ahead and replace that with a 3/8 inch thick aluminum insert from MLCS, because the Grizzly router table is the MLCS router table with Grizzly's own base. But everything above the base, this is all the MLCS router table. So the 3/8 inch thick insert drops right in to replace the crappy phenolic insert that it comes with. So, but for the price, I think it's worth it. It's just a basic, very basic router table. But again, this is not a tool that I use all that often. It's something, again, that I bought for the kitchen cabinet build. I'm not sure that I'll even have much use for it after I finish the kitchen cabinets, so we'll see what ends up happening to this thing in the long run. For now, I'll use it to finish up the kitchen cabinets, and in all honesty, most of the time, it's just another flat surface in the shop that ends up getting piled up with junk. Another tool that I have along this wall is this shop vacuum cart that I built last year. It's just a wall-mounted shop vac that is mounted to the center support here with a dust deputy attachment. I really like this because it has, this shop vac came with a really long hose. It's like an 18 or 20 foot hose, which is much longer than your typical shop vac and really lets me move around and do whatever cleaning I need to do without having to move the shop vac itself as much. So the hose really gives me a lot more room, and the cart's nice. I don't know, it was a design that I saw online and I just copied it, so it works well. You know, it's just a shop vac. Here on the eastern wall of the shop between the garage doors is surprise number 3. This Jet 14-inch bandsaw I got last December 2019. When I had my little 100 square foot hand tool shop in New Jersey, one of the tools that I often wished I had room for was a bandsaw. Now, while I love hand tools and I still use my hand saws to rip and resaw boards to this day all the time, really long rips in really thick hardwood are really not a whole lot of fun, especially when there are a lot of them that need to be done. So when I moved into this shop, the bandsaw was one tool that I knew I absolutely wanted to have to save time when I do have a lot of rips or a lot of resaw cuts to make. As for this machine specifically, it has served my purposes really well over the past almost year. It's got plenty of power for me. I am not a bowl turner, so I am not going to be hoisting up giant green logs on this thing and roughing out bowl blanks, though I have absolute confidence that it's perfectly capable of that. But I really need it for furniture making. Long rips, long resaw cuts, and the occasional scroll cut that I don't want to or can't do with my hand bow saw or turning saw. So this has been a great addition to the shop for me. So surprise number 4 is also here on the eastern wall of the shop in front of the left garage bay door. You know, if you use hand tools only, you really don't need these things, as most people will tell you. And I haven't had one for over 20 years. This is the most recent addition to the shop. I got this earlier this year. I think it was April or May. And the thing is, if you're going to have machines in your shop, you have to have some type of dust collection, especially if your shop is connected to your house. I value my lungs. You only get one pair of them. And the way I feel is that if you're going to use machines inside your house, you really should have good dust collection. I tried to go the cheap route with the Harbor Freight unit. And while it would pull chips from things like a planer, and it will pull dust from a table saw or a bandsaw, but the dust that it picks up from the table saw and the bandsaw pretty much spits right back out into the air through that useless bag that they put on top of it. Now you could, of course, go with putting a cartridge filter on top of the Harbor Freight, and a lot of people have done that successfully. But what I felt was, if I'm going to have machines, I want to protect myself, I want to protect my family. This is the absolute most expensive tool in this shop, and it probably always will be. But I also think in terms of my health, my family's health, if I'm going to use machines, this is also the most important tool in the shop. So I did not feel bad about spending a little bit of money on this if I'm going to have machines in the shop. This is the 3-horse unit. It may seem like overkill for what I have. I really don't do any sanding for the most part. I do a little bit of hand sanding, but I'm not using random orbit sanders or wide belt sanders or anything like that. I have the machines that I've showed you so far, plus 1 or 2 more that I'll show you in a minute. But this does the job very well for this small space. I can roll it around. I don't have any permanent ducting installed. Maybe I'll do that someday, but for right now I don't see a need to do it. I just move this to where it needs to go. In fact, this hose can reach most of the machines from where it is. I don't even really have to move it, so it does fine just where it is. It does a fantastic job of collecting dust at the bandsaw. It does the best job that it can at the table saw with the poor setup and dust collection that that contractor saw has. It works well for my thickness planer, so it does the job that I need it to do. 3 horsepower, maybe a little bit overkill, but I felt that I wanted to collect all the dust that I could. The cartridge filter on this does a very nice job. I can work for in here with my machines for hours if I need to, working on kitchen cabinets or or whatever it is that I'm working on that I need to do with the machines. Leave the shop, come back, and there's almost no dust on any of the surfaces in the shop. So it really does a good job at what it's supposed to do, and that's the reason that I spent the money on it that I did, even though it might be a little bit of overkill for the space that I'm in and the tools that I have. I felt my health and my family's health was the most important thing, so we really went ahead and kind of went a little bit overboard on the dust collection. So here on the center wall between the two garage bays is where my thickness planer lives. This was another tool that came out of the kitchen cabinet budget back in 2018. It does an okay job, you know, it is what it is, it's just a thicknesser. While I would prefer a freestanding unit with a universal motor that would be much, much quieter than this particular unit, this one does the job when I need to thickness a lot of stuff. I really only use it when I have a lot of stock that I have to mill all to the same thickness, you know, like I would for the kitchen cabinets. If I just have a few boards that I need to plane up, and they don't have to all be perfect, even if they do have to be perfect. If it's not a lot of stock and it's in a well-behaved species, I still prefer the quiet workout of my hand planes to using the thickness planer. But when I have a lot of stock to mill up, if I'm doing a whole bunch of kitchen cabinets, or I've got a project that I'm working on where I absolutely have to have everything all to the same thickness, and there's like 60 or 74 board feet of it that needs to be that thickness, then I'll bite the bullet and fire this thing up. But it's awful loud, and I prefer not to if I don't have to. I still prefer my hand planes. So here in the southwest quadrant of the shop is where I keep my lathe. Now, I learned to turn by building and using a spring pole lathe for many years, and that lathe did absolutely everything that I needed it to do. Unfortunately, an old hockey injury kept me from using it as much as I'd like to. When I would use the spring pole lathe for any significant length of time, I would re-aggravate an old knee injury, and I would have trouble walking sometimes for almost a week afterwards. So it was not really by choice that I gave up using the spring pole lathe. If it weren't for my old knee injury, I would probably still be using the spring pole lathe today because I really did enjoy using it. But this Rikon has not disappointed me. It is a MIDI version. I bought it so that I could, add a bed extension at a later date. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I am not a bowl turner, so I was not concerned with having a giant lathe that I'd be using for off-balance bowl blanks. I'm a furniture maker. While I may someday make a few small bowls, I'm primarily a furniture maker, and that's really what I wanted a lathe for, is for turning furniture and chair parts. And for that purpose, this lathe suits me perfectly, and it has been a great addition to the shop. Also, as you can see, I don't do a lot of turning because this bench just ends up getting piled with a whole lot of stuff. I've got some fly tying totes here with my fly tying vise. I think there's a glue pot back there somewhere, and some other random junk piled around. So being another flat surface, this one, because the lathe doesn't get used all that often, does tend to get piled up with junk, and it's really just a reminder to me that I need to build more storage for this space. Also in this corner, I keep my clamp cart. For decades, I had always stored my clamps on the wall because I just didn't have the storage, the space for a rolling clamp cart. But I really always wanted to build one of these because I always felt that having clamps on a mobile cart was really, really convenient so that I could bring the clamps where I needed them. But again, not having the space in previous shops, I always store my clamps on the wall. So when I moved into this shop, this was one of the things that I built. Again, I think I built this last year, and it has been a really great addition to the shop. You can see I also keep a bunch of scrap wood here in this corner. I have to do something to try and organize this a little bit better. I do have some ideas about maybe putting up a small lumber rack somewhere on one of the walls, but I do have a spare shed I do have an outbuilding where I do keep my lumber, so I don't really need to keep a lot of lumber inside the shop. I just need to kind of organize this stuff a little bit better. And then this door here, this was the door back to the water heater that I talked to you about earlier in the video. So here in the southeast quadrant of the shop is where my sharpening area is. I have a small bench that I built several years ago that I do my sharpening on. I'm currently using a set of Sigma water stones, and I also have some oil stone slips and other miscellaneous sharpening equipment that I keep up here in the cupboard. Also on this bench, I have one of the very first Gramercy Tools saw sharpening vices, and it is absolutely the best vise that I have ever used for saw sharpening. Maybe someday I'll get the opportunity to try a giant Acme vise, but short of the giant Acme saw vices, the Gramercy is absolutely the best one you can buy, and I'm very, very happy to have it. Also next to the sharpening bench, I have a small cupboard that I built that holds my grinder. I do hollow grind my tools, and I also sharpen my lathe chisels here. I did have a 6-inch grinder before, but when that one died and I went looking for a new one, there happened to be a sale on this 8-inch Rikon, so I went ahead and purchased it, and it has been a fine grinder. It does the job just fine. I did add the Wolverine tool rest system to it because, you know, for the most part, tool rests for most grinders kind of suck. So I decided that I would go ahead and add the Wolverine to this system, and I've been very happy with it. So that brings us back to the bench area, which again is the area that you're used to seeing in most of my videos. As you can see, this area, the bench area, pretty much takes up the entire center portion of the left garage bay. I'm currently using a small French bench that I built a couple years ago. It is 6 feet long by 18 inches deep. I find it okay for most work. It's not the greatest for an assembly table because it is kind of small. It's also a little bit lightweight as a result of having built it out of white pine that was left over from the cabin. Most of these, in fact, all of these parts are, you know, roof rafters or posts that were cut-offs from, you know, roof rafters or support posts from the cabin. So, so while it was cool to be able to use up those scraps to build a workbench, it is a little small, it is a little bit lightweight, and it was an experiment for the most part. While I really don't want to build another bench, I do have a feeling that another bench will be in my future, because as I said, this one's a little bit small, a little bit lightweight. If I'm doing really heavy planing, it does move around the floor a little bit. I do still have the English workbench that my lathe is currently on. That one is definitely heavier, but still made of soft construction material. It's a hem fir, so it's pretty much just as soft as this white pine. And again, it's a fantastic workbench as well. But I'm not sure where I'm going to end up in the future. I do think there will be another workbench in my future. It's just not really a priority right now. Behind the workbench, I also have my chimney cupboard. This is a piece that I built for the June 2013 issue of Popular Woodworking magazine, and it does a fantastic job of storing all of my finishing supplies. I've got, you know, some hand sandpaper in here, my kettle for steaming, for my steam box down there, solvents, glues, what have you. So the chimney cupboard is great for that. I also have my full-size English tool chest back here that stores all of my hand tools. And I really have what I would say is a love-hate relationship with this particular way of storing tools. Back when I was in my shop in New Jersey, if you watch some of my earlier videos, you'll see that I had all of my tools stored on the wall, and I absolutely love that method of storing tools. I had some overflow tools in a travel-sized English tool chest, and that was great. I loved storing the overflow in the travel-sized tool chest because it was tools that really just weren't used all the time. The problem I have with this is it never seems to be really well organized. The tools are just kind of thrown in tills. They tend to bang around and knock around. And while I realize they're tools, they're meant to be used, they're going to get dinged, they're going to get banged up, they're going to look used. That's also kind of a hard pill to swallow, you know, when you spend almost $200 on a single tool and there's, you know, it gets all scratched up just from banging around in the tool chest, not really from hard use. So I don't really like that all the tools are loose in tills, and while I could make dividers and divide things up a little better, I'm not really crazy about working out of the tool chest to begin with. The other thing I don't really care for is that the tools that I use the most, other than the layout tools that are in the tills and the chisels that are on the front wall, but the planes and the saws, which are one of the most used tools in a traditional workshop, are all at the bottom of the chest, and they're all, you know, the biggest pain in the butt to get to because they're under 3 sliding tills. And I know people love their English tool chests. For me, I think they're great for overflow storage. I'm not crazy about working out of it as your only tool storage solution day in and day out. I do think there are better methods. I really, again, prefer storing my tools on the wall like I had in my old shop. So I do think I'm going to have some changes made to my hand tool storage solutions, but again, it just hasn't really been a priority. I have so many other higher priority things to work on right now, so that will come someday. For now, they'll just stay in the chest. So that's the space. Thanks for joining me on my shop tour. As you can tell, it is an evolving space. I still have more storage to build and cabinets and things, so I'm sure there's going to be changes to this space. So maybe in another year or two, I'll come back and do another shop tour and talk about what I've changed. In the meantime, though, let me know what you'd like to see in future videos. Now, I realize I primarily try to stick to hand tool focused stuff, which really keeps us at the bench most of the time. But if you'd like to see more of the shop in future videos, let me know. If you'd like to see other techniques with the bandsaw or the drill presser or whatever, let me know, and I'll try to incorporate more of that kind of stuff into the videos. Let me know in the comments below. So other than that, thanks for stopping by. I really got to get back to work because this place is much too clean.